Johnny Davy of Job for a Cowboy was recently a guest on Full Metal Jackie's weekend radio show to talk about the band's new album Moon Healer. It's their first album since their 10-year hiatus, and it's about a friend who seeks enlightenment through hallucinogens. Davy also talks about the state of metal today and getting back together with the band. When asked if it was easy stepping back into the band, Davy said the following, "Wow. Heavy question. At a certain point, we drifted apart. We kind of went our own separate ways. Some of the guys went on their specific career routes. One of the guys got their PhD. I went into the land of coding and programming. Other guys like Nick, our bassist. He toured with Havoc for quite a while. But as far as the difficulty of getting back together and kind of getting that collaboration and flow again, it was really easy. It just kind of felt like more or less just getting back on the bike, you know? We don't ride a bike for a long time. It's just, you never really lose it or forget it. And it just kind of felt like we were all put in a time machine and we all went 10 years back to where we were before and nothing really changed. It just felt like we're going back to work." When asked about the album and making sure the story was told right, Davey said, "It wasn't difficult at all, to be honest. This particular friend had a couple of screws loose, to be honest, and I kind of dug into a lot of the ideas and concepts and beliefs he was into. And it was honestly pretty entertaining. It was a lot of fun just learning about all of the things this particular person was into and just having a better understanding as to the person that they were. So to be 100% honest, it was a blast, and it was relatively easy." When asked about telling the story visually along with the music, Davey said, "Yeah, totally. I feel like when we have a concept like this, it's pretty easy to tie it all together. You're right. It is music first and visual second, but I mean, everything's based off of the music and the lyrics. So we flow into creating the visuals for the video pretty easy. I mean, Nick and I spent a lot of time talking about ideas and concepts, and it was just a blast making those videos. And Nick did a great job, and we might even do some more in the future if the time means in our favor." When asked about the 10-year break, what brought them back together, and how he balances life as a touring musician, Davey said, "I'll start with the balance. As a touring musician, that's more difficult than ever. As we're older, a couple of guys have their own separate careers. And like I said, some of the guys have their own music projects. So trying to get the playing together is much more difficult than it ever was because 10 years ago, before we had families, careers, other projects, this was by far the main focus. And life kind of gets in the way, and for some of us, this band isn't quite the main focus as it was before. So that's definitely a bit more difficult these days. As far as to why we broke back then, to be honest, it's almost hard to pinpoint as to what it was. I guess one of the biggest catalysts was definitely myself. I was going to have my first child, so that definitely put a big pause in everything. And I think just due to the fact that I kind of started the family life, the guys just couldn't wait around for me. That's the reality of it. So they kind of had to part ways and find their own things to do. When asked on his opinion where death metal stands, challenges he faces now, and if there's any new bands catching his interest, Davey said, "Man, you've got all the heavy questions. Usually the questions are so repetitive as far as you get so many of the same questions asked over and over. But as far as how the death metal world has changed, I mean, I personally don't see a whole lot of changes. But obviously a lot of things have changed. I think there's a big emphasis on an old-school death metal revival. There's a lot of that going around with the technical side. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we kind of have this metalhead old-school death metal revival, and then the complete other side of the spectrum. We have this otherworldly technicality side of it that just keeps getting more and more crazy. So it almost feels like the seeds just keep separating more and more from one another. I definitely see that as far as newer bands. There's a ton. I've always tried to keep up with as much as possible, just so I can be in the know, and I love it. I've always been a fan of listening to as much music as I can. A lot of stuff this year that pops to mind. I mean, there's a new horrendous album, the new Zenith Passage record, the new Zoft record. It's endless. I feel like my head's always spinning in circles, trying to keep up with everything, but it's a blast. There's kind of something for everyone. When asked what 2024 has in store for the band, Davey said, "Well, obviously, the record is the big one. I think at this point, We're just trying to figure out some shows, possibly some tours to hop on. Nothing's confirmed yet. As I mentioned earlier, it's been pretty difficult just due to the fact that we'll have so many things going on in our own personal lives. And just trying to line those things up between one another is always difficult.